Every community has its rituals, its sacred vows to keep the darkness at bay. For the people of Ekonu Valley, their pact was simple, terrible, and absolutely necessary. Once a year, before the first rain, each person had to approach the great Iroko tree at the village edge and whisper a precious memory into its roots. A first kiss. A mother's lullaby. The memory would be consumed, forgotten forever, and in exchange, the tree would hold back the chaotic, hungry spirits of the past. But rituals require remembrance. What happens when the keepers of the peace forget the peace itself? This year, they did. And the tree is no longer just taking memories. It's taking people. Our guide into this nightmare is Louisa, a young archivist, the village's appointed rememberer. Her role was sacred, to document everything except the memories sacrificed to the Iroko, the forgetting tree. She kept the census, the harvest records, the family lineages. Her flaw was a quiet, simmering resentment. While others forgot first loves and personal triumphs, she had to remember everything. The weight of their collective, selective amnesia was her burden. She watched her own father forget her 5th birthday. She recorded her mother forgetting how they'd met. Louisa remembered it all, a silent vault of stolen moments. The ritual was managed by the elder, Babatunde, a man whose own mind was a patchwork of holes from decades of sacrifices. He followed the calendar, the phases of the moon, the feel of the wind. It was time. But this year was different. A strange, blissful lethargy had settled over Ekonu. A booming harvest, no sickness, perfect weather. For the first time in living memory, life was easy. And in that ease, a subtle neglect crept in. Babatunde, his mind frayed by so many forgotten years, hesitated. Was it the full moon or the new moon? He meant to check Louisa's records, but he got distracted by the laughter of children, a sound so pure it felt like a memory he wanted to keep. He delayed. The village, sensing no urgency from their elder, did nothing. The deadline passed. A week. Then 2. Louisa felt the wrongness first. The great Iroko tree, usually a majestic, silent sentinel, began to look hungry. Its leaves, always a deep green, took on a glossy, almost fleshy hue. The ground around its massive roots, usually hard-packed earth, became soft, dark, and damp, like fresh soil on a grave. She went to Babatunde. Elder, the tree, the ritual. It is overdue. Babatunde smiled a vacant, peaceful smile. All is well, child. Look at our peace. The tree is satisfied. Perhaps the old pact is finally fulfilled. But that night, the whispers began. Not from the tree, but from the villagers. Old man Robert woke his wife, asking who she was. A young woman named Kyla could no longer remember how to weave, though it had been her trade since childhood. They were losing memories at random. The tree was no longer waiting for offerings. It was sampling. And then, the first disappearance. Antonio, a vibrant storyteller, was last seen walking toward the Iroko at dusk, muttering about a story he could no longer recall. He never returned. The tree was no longer just taking memories. It was taking the vessels. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced the village's haze of peace. Babatunde, his memory jolted by terror, rushed to the sacred clearing. The Iroko stood, larger than ever. Its trunk pulsed subtly, as if breathing. Around its base, half absorbed into the soft earth, lay personal items: Antonio's favorite hat, a hairpin belonging to a woman who'd forgotten her own name the day before. The tree was integrating them, making them part of itself. A frantic council was called. Babatunde, shaking, decreed they must perform the ritual immediately. But a new, more terrible problem emerged. The ritual required a specific chant, a sequence of words passed down orally from elder to elder. Babatunde couldn't remember it. He had sacrificed that memory years ago to save the village from a blight. The knowledge was gone. The procedure was lost. Louisa, poring over her archives, found only cryptic references. The words bind the memory to the root. The offerer must speak the memory with true feeling, then release it on the wind toward the crown. But the words? Not written. Never written. The rememberer was not allowed to know the spell of forgetting. Now, the tree's sampling became a feast. Another villager vanished, a young mother named Ebel. Her infant was found crying beneath the Iroko, cradled in a nest of roots that had not been there the day before. The tree was taking not just memories, but roles, loves, lives. Worst of all, the lost memories began to leak. Louisa would touch the bark and be flooded with a vision of Antonio's lost story, a tale of a hidden river. Another villager, resting against the tree, suddenly recalled Kyla's forgotten weaving technique, but not his own son's face. The tree was digesting its meals, and the psychic runoff was poisoning the village's remaining memories, scrambling them. Louisa realized the horrific truth. The forgetting tree wasn't a guardian. It was a filter. A prison. It consumed specific, potent human memories to sate a hunger, and in return, it walled off the village from the screaming chaos of unprocessed history. But without the ritual chant, the offering was unclean. The tree was taking everything, and it was getting stronger, more conscious, with each person it absorbed. She found a clue in the oldest, most fragile scroll. A warning from the first rememberer: if the chant is lost, the roots remember. But to hear it, one must listen from inside the prison. A dangerous remembrance. Babatunde, crumbling under guilt, interpreted this literally. We must go into the roots. Dig. Find the old words carved there. He led a group of men with spades. They dug at the base of the tree. The soft earth gave way easily, too easily. It was like digging into cold, wet flesh. The roots they uncovered were white, veined with black, and they twitched. And then the ground swallowed them. Not a collapse. An ingestion. The roots surged up like pale snakes, wrapping around Babatunde, Robert, and the others, dragging them screaming into the suffocating earth. Their cries were cut off in seconds. The tree had been offered a direct, violent memory, the memory of their fear, and it accepted. Louisa was alone. The village was in total despair. More were vanishing hourly, drawn to the tree in a trance, their minds picked clean before their bodies were taken. The Iroko now dominated the skyline, its branches creaking with a sinister weight that wasn't just wood. The scroll's clue echoed in her mind. Listen from inside the prison. Not a physical prison. The prison of forgotten memories. The tree held them all. Every first kiss, every lullaby, every personal victory sacrificed for centuries. That was the prison. To hear the chant, she had to navigate that prison. It meant making the ultimate sacrifice for a rememberer, to willingly forget. To offer a memory so precious, so core to her identity, that it would grant her passage into the tree's psychic vault. She had to forget her purpose. She had to forget she was the rememberer. With a devastating resolve, Louisa walked to the Iroko. She placed her hands on the pulsing bark. She closed her eyes and thought of her most treasured memory. The day her grandmother, the previous rememberer, placed the archive key in her hand and said, "You are the village's soul." She felt the memory, bright and beautiful. And then, she imagined handing it to the tree. She didn't know the chant. So she spoke from her heart. "I offer you my reason for being. Take my duty. Take my title. Let me in, so I can learn how to make you stop." The tree shuddered. A root broke the surface, not to grab her, but to gently brush her temple. A vortex of stolen memories sucked her consciousness in. She stood in a ghostly forest made of shimmering, frozen moments. Here was Antonio's lost story, playing on a loop. There, her father's memory of her 5th birthday. A million moments, suspended, weeping. And in the center, a pulsing knot of light, the collective consciousness of the tree, formed from all the ingested villagers. Babatunde's face flickered within it, terrified. Antonio's, Ebel's. They were not dead. They were trapped, their identities dissolving into the tree's hunger. From this knot, a voice echoed, the original, pristine chant. Louisa memorized it. It was simple. A song of release and binding. But she also saw the truth. The tree was never the problem. It was a symptom. The village's original sin was not some ancient war, but a pact with a spirit of lethargy and ease. They chose to forget their pains, their sins, their struggles. The tree was the engine of that choice. To stop it now would be to reclaim every painful, ugly, beautiful memory it had ever consumed. The village would be hit with centuries of repressed grief, regret, and joy all at once. It would shatter them. She had a choice. Use the chant to re-establish the ritual, condemning future generations to forget. Or, use the chant backwards, to break the pact entirely, and unleash the torrent. Her consciousness was shoved back into her body. She gasped, on her knees before the tree. She had forgotten her grandmother's words. She no longer felt like the rememberer. But she knew the chant. The remaining villagers gathered, desperate. "What do we do, Louisa?" She looked at the monstrous, beautiful tree. She looked at their hollow, scared faces. They had forgotten the rules. But she remembered the cost. She began to sing. Not the chant of offering. She sang the words backwards. The Iroko tree let out a sound like 1,000 hearts breaking. Its branches thrashed. The ground quaked. And then, from its bark, from its leaves, from the very air around it, memories poured out. Not as whispers, but as physical, screaming storms of experience. They flooded into the village. People collapsed, clutching their heads as lifetimes that were not their own assaulted them. They felt the joy of forgotten first loves, the agony of ancient betrayals, the mundane beauty of a million lost mornings. It was overwhelming. Cataclysmic. When the storm passed, the great Iroko tree was just a tree. Old, silent, dormant. But the village of Ekonu was forever changed. They remembered everything. The good. The terrible. The price of their peace. They were no longer a community of ease. They were a community of survivors, weighed down by a history they could never again escape. Louisa, her own past a blank where her purpose once was, picked up a fallen branch from the Iroko. It was ordinary wood. She did not remember what to do with it. The pact was broken. The forgetting tree was just a tree. But the people of Ekonu now walk through a world saturated with ghosts, the ghosts of all they chose to discard. Babatunde, Antonio, Ebel, they are gone, absorbed. Their memories live on, but their voices are part of the choir in everyone's head. Louisa lives in the archive, surrounded by records she no longer fully understands. Sometimes, she touches the old scrolls and feels an echo of a duty, a love, she can't recall. She is the first rememberer who cannot remember herself, the guardian of a truth that set her people free and broke them in the process. The moral is carved from memory and wood: peace bought with selective forgetting is not peace. It is a slow, communal suicide. The past denied does not vanish. It gathers in the shadows, grows roots, and waits to reclaim every single thing you tried to bury. But what do you think? Was Louisa's choice to break the pact an act of salvation or mass cruelty? Could the village have found another way? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to Safari of Tales and hit the bell icon. Remember, some memories are prisons. And some freedoms are cages. Until next time, try to remember.